Welcome everyone to this session on apps for the planet. My name is John Kress. I'm a research scientist at the National Museum of Natural History at the Smithsonian, and I agreed to moderate this panel. So before we begin to hear from our 5 speakers with their presentations on different types of apps that have been developed to understand the planet better, I thought I would give us some background on why we're even doing this, and I'm sure you've been hearing this since the very first talk this morning. I'll give you a little bit different perspective. I'm a tropical ecologist, and what you're seeing right here, and let's see, I don't guess I have any pointer. We're interested in nature and the diversity of nature. I take this example. I've been working in this forest in Costa Rica. On the right, on your right side here, are about 80 species of plants that occur in a 10-hectare portion of forest. There's about 80 species there. On your left are about 120 species of beetles that only feed on these plants on the right. Now we can add up all those numbers and come up with an estimate of diversity based upon just species number, but that's not all that's happening in the ecosystems that we're working in. We're also interested in how these species are interacting. And the complexity of those interactions far outshadows just the number of species. So we can count up the number of species interacting in this forest, or we can count up the number of interactions, and we have a magnitude, if not 2 or 3 more magnitudes, of complexity. And in many cases, it's that complexity that we're very interested in understanding and actually conserving. But of course, we all know, and as we've heard today, there are a lot of threats to this diversity. And again, not just the species, but also to the interactions in the habitats where we're working around the world. Now, these various threats, and I won't go into all of them because of time. You've heard about a number of them, including invasive species, habitat degradation. But all of these threats to species is also leading to their extinction. And that's one of the main, I could say, crises that we're trying to be optimistic about this weekend in addressing how we're going to change the scenario of the planet right now. As scientists, we are all devising new gizmos, new instruments, new ways of assessing diversity, whether it's species diversity or complexity diversity. Primarily, though, many of us, what we want to know is 3 things. 1, what species is it? We want to record that species, and we also want to know where that species is found. Now, we can do this by sending out botanists such as this around, and I'm a botanist, so around the world, recording those 3 things, but we will never get the job done. There's not enough scientists around. So we want to enlist the aid of you, of citizen scientists that can help us record those 3 things, at least for some of these apps we're going to talk about. What is it? Record where it is, and something about it. And so, just to talk about the greatest app that's ever been devised, just joking, you'll hear about 5 other really good apps, but to hear about one of them, I just wanted to illustrate LeafSnap, something I've been involved in developing. And LeafSnap is an app on that you can put on your iPhone for free. Its main purpose is to do those 3 things. First of all, identify a species of tree, record that species of tree, and determine where it's located. And you can do that simply by taking a photo of a leaf of a tree. That photo goes up to our server. In 10 seconds, you get an identification of that tree. And in 10 more seconds after you label it, you give us a permanent record of where you found that tree. And that record goes up to our server. LeafSnap was released about 6 years ago. We just finished analyzing the data for the first 3 years. And believe it or not, even though LeafSnap is only applies to about, at this point, 200 species of trees in the northeastern U.S., it's already, we've downloaded 3 million snaps from 1.5 million users in 181 countries around the world. Citizen scientists, and not even citizen scientists, just citizens, are obviously interested in using the phones they have and the equipment they have to look at nature, and I think this is what we're all going to be talking about today. 3 million downloads of 3 million snaps is a lot of data. That's more than we could ever gather as scientists doing that. But what are we doing with this data? Just a quick statement. Some of you may know that as the climate changes, as the Earth warms up, as habitats are altered, species are beginning to move around the planet. And so what we're doing with LeafSnap and the data that's being collected by citizen science and LeafSnap is to begin to map where trees are moving. And these two little maps of two species from the Northeast, one Quercus schumartii and the other Quercus velutina, two oaks. The green outline, if you can see that, is kind of the original distribution of these plants as recorded 50 years ago. And the little blue dots are where citizen scientists have actually recorded the presence of this species using LeafSnap. And as you can see, we're seeing these species move out of their normal habitats. And this is going to help us, greatly help us as scientists and as conservationists in understanding how the planet is changing and how life is moving around the planet. So there's just one example of an app. I'd like to let's go back to that slide. We have 5 different presenters. They're going to give you 5 different perspectives on apps that citizen science could use. And the first one is going to be Marshall Iliff talking about eBird. So, Marshall. By the way, we're going to try to get through these presentations and then have a panel discussion at the end in which you can ask some of these scientists about the apps that they've created.
So, although not everyone would know that whether this is a yellow-throated vireo or a yellow-throated warbler, there are millions of bird watchers in the United States and a massive number of people globally that take time out of their day to enjoy birds and are inspired by them. It's easy to understand why. They're beautiful, colorful, engaging, comical. They occur everywhere from the plains of sub-Saharan Africa to iceberg-laden oceans of Antarctica. And they're no less striking in our suburban backyards than they are in Amazonia. They fly while we only dream of flying. Imagine this Arctic tern migrating 44,000 miles, more than twice around the planet each year. Or think about this scarlet tanager just down the street in Rock Creek Park, which probably spent the winter in Amazonian Peru and started north about a month ago, flying under its own wing power. All that movement and changeover makes it really fun for bird watchers. Every time we go out, it's like a treasure hunt. You never know what species you're going to find. I visit a local park near my house in Boston. I've been there over 1,100 times, and every few months I find a new species for that place. I started my bird watching at age 11, and 10 years ago, I landed my dream job at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where we're all united by this dream that birds can save the world. This, of course, doesn't mean that a flock of eagles is going to swoop in and carry us away from the apocalypse. But the very fact that so many people love birds and that they give us so many reasons to love them place birds among the very best ambassadors of the planet. So I'm here on behalf of eBird, which really isn't a single app, but really a whole family of apps that we use to understand birds all around the planet. So it's a citizen science effort to collect and harness the power of all those bird watchers. And it's founded on the hypothesis that amateur birdwatcher data can be useful for science and conservation. This fortune cookie says your observations are useful to others. And while this fortune cookie may think that, it was not universally accepted by the ornithological establishment when eBird was released. The notion that someone counting chickadees and cardinals at their backyard bird feeder can generate useful scientific data really required some proof. So in order to prove that, eBird had to start collecting good data, and it had to collect a lot of it. But in its first 2 years, the curve was completely flat. It floundered with its initial do-gooder message that you should contribute your birds to science, you'll help save the planet, it'll be good for birds and good for the world. But the truth is, we're all busy. People need rewards and incentives to do something as boring as data entry. And it wasn't until we built those incentives into the program that we started to see the birdwatchers use it, and the data started to take off. So we added games that birdwatchers loved. And above all else, birdwatchers love statistics, maybe second only to baseball fans. Ask any birder about their list totals, and you'll almost always get an exact answer. So for me, it's 3,812 in the world, 857 in the United States, 373 in my home state of Maryland, and 216 in my local park in Massachusetts. A new bird for any of these lists would literally make my day. But what used to require expensive software packages, now eBird's giving away for free. And we generate all kinds of stats, pages and pages to tally your personal statistics for a region or country or state or county or month or year, every combination in between. And just like any human being, as soon as you start to keep score, you want to compete. So arranging these people's names and numbers on this list, I'm number 5. Is one of the most important and popular pages on our site. There's no endorphin rush like seeing your name on a list, especially when it's above your friend's total. So the power of the crowd suddenly made us able to visualize bird distribution, migration in new ways, whether it's migration or a range map like this, interactive range map where you can zoom in and figure out exactly where to find that purple finch. So birdwatchers have started planning their birding outings around these maps and trying to figure out how to go find the next species. Sorry. So to truly succeed, we needed to take eBird away from Ithaca, away from a web-based platform, and make it global, mobile, and multilingual. And this slide's showing eBird profile pages from all around the world that are connecting birdwatchers from Iceland to Iran and Tierra del Fuego to Thailand, all united in this common cause of collecting bird data for the planet. So we're committed to providing this data completely free and open to anyone who wants to analyze it, but to actually be useful for science, we had to catch a different wave, which is big data. As it turned out, it wasn't the ornithologists, but rather computer scientists who were looking for curated data sets with lots of patterns to try to detect that dove into this 400 million record data set and suddenly gave birth to this whole new field of big data ornithology all around eBird. So this map is showing little dots, which are the centroids of bird ranges. And here in spring, you see them start to stream north to their breeding grounds. And I'm going to have you focus just on the dots way out to the east as they head back south on a more leisurely fall migration. Those are little songbirds taking the shortcut to South America all the way out over the ocean. There's a whole textbook of bird migration biology we could talk about with this, but I'm in a time crunch. So we'll look at an individual species. This is magnolia warbler, little yellow and black bird. The entire population packs into that little area in the Yucatan Peninsula, then migrates north and spreads out across all of Canada. And if you think about the conservation implications of this hugely widespread breeding bird, then wintering in this really tight area, then you'll be glad to hear that these models were used in a tri-national State of the Birds report with Canada, Mexico, and the United States last year to really prioritize that Yucatan forest and make sure it's protected into the future. So while the science and conservation uses of eBird are really inspirational, we actually think that its greatest power is the ability to connect birdwatchers, connect new people to the environment through birds. And this process always used to start with a traditional field guide. You'd open this thing up, it's 400 pages long, there's 800 birds in this thing, and you'd open up looking for this thing and you'd find 30 pages of yellow birds with black streaks on their breast. I can only imagine how many would-be bird watchers gave up on the process at that point. And then you try to think about a millennial doing that today. So we get rid of the field guide, and now we draw on eBird to deliver to your phone site-specific lists of likely species for anywhere on the planet. And I'm going to play a little video here.
If you've ever wondered, what is that bird? Let Merlin help you unlock the mystery. Merlin is a new app from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It makes bird identification easier by showing you the birds in your own area that match what you've seen. Merlin asks you a few simple questions. When and where did you see the bird? What did it look like? And what was it doing? Almost like magic, Merlin shows you the most likely species for your area on that day. But these aren't wild guesses. Merlin knows which birds are near you by tapping into eBird, a database with millions of sightings from birders around the world. It finds out which species you're most likely to encounter and tailors results for your location. Rob?
So the Merlin app now has over 1 million downloads. We're translating it into Spanish and Portuguese, expanding it to Mexico, Central America, Brazil, and Europe. And it really gives us hope that if we can continue to engage more bird watchers to contribute their data and then continue to grow more bird watchers from the ground up through apps like Merlin, that birds really can save the world. I got a phone.
I thought this was just going to go down now. Okay, so 10 years ago, the idea for Marine Debris Tracker came to me when I was working with community-based coastal cleanup groups, and I walked into some of my colleagues' offices and saw stacks of data cards like 2 feet high. And as a scientist and engineer, I thought, oh, look at all that data just sitting there in a pile on the floor. And there's such a lag time to the data reaching the folks who were taking out, picking up trash, writing on data cards, that they never really got any feedback, maybe a year later. So the first version of Marine Debris Tracker was actually on a PDA, which are completely obsolete. But there was a form that I created, and my students went out and for the first time collected GPS coordinates for every piece of trash that they were picking up. And of course, the PDA had to come back in and be logged to the computer to get the data, but it was still faster and more efficient and hopefully more accurate than the paper cards. But then they discontinued the PDAs when I went to try to order more, and that's because smartphones came out. And that was just a dream because we had already hoped to do wireless transmission of this data, and now we were able to. And so luckily I convinced the NOAA Marine Debris Program that this would be a great idea. We should make an app for this. And not only would we have more efficient data collection, more accurate data collection, but also put this power in just every citizen's hands. So quickly, I probably don't have to talk so much about this now that you had the great introduction to eBird, but really this is about letting the technology work for you. Citizens want to contribute data, but at the same time we need to make it really simple for them. And so this is a platform that's available for free on iPhone or Android right now. And honestly, it's just a couple clicks, by a citizen as they're out. If they notice trash in our environment, they can go ahead and pick it up, manage it properly if they can, and tell us in a few clicks what that is. I think we're going to see this advancing in terms of technology. Leaf snap, you're able to snap a picture, but that's because many leaves have a predictable pattern. So hopefully one day we'll be able to also do image recognition, and of course voice recognition would be great for this process. So to give a little context, why do we need to get, and it's probably pretty obvious why we need to get trash out of our environment, but just the awareness that has been raised lately with this issue, especially for plastic in our environment. So this was research I participated in about 4 years after Marine Debris Tracker came out, but we quantified the global input of plastic into our oceans. And we've estimated that about 8 million metric tons of plastic is going into our ocean every year. And our citizens are becoming aware, and you are not happy. So what can we do about this? And so this is where there's a lot of things, but not all of them seem reachable to us, right? So this is my life. This is what I do for my research, is to try to address this issue. And so there's a lot of things that I would say are sort of upstream of this that maybe seem out of reach. Can you participate in material substitution and product design? It doesn't feel like it, right? So, but what we can do is people notice the trash and the litter in our environment, along our coastlines and along our waterways. And so then they can take action. They can tell us about it. They can pick up that material, which many people do anyway without reporting. At least I did growing up, doing that with my mom. And so hopefully by the end of this talk, though, I'm going to show you how actually the power of doing this sort of what seems like a downstream solution can influence what we're doing upstream. So this is our front line. It's kids at their playground, outside on their school grounds. It's groups of community groups like I worked with previously in New Hampshire on our coastlines. It's folks looking on their streets, near their storm drains. It's our friends and our families. This is the front line of Marine Debris Tracker. I did have a beautiful animated map of all of our data. Right now we're about to reach a million, or we have reached, just reached 1 million items that have been logged. We don't have as many downloads. I think our downloads right now are just over 15,000. But when I was first creating this app, well, first of all, I went to my computer systems colleague, who's my co-developer, and said, if we have 1 million people around the world telling us they're picking up a cigarette butt, can we do this? Can our servers handle this? And he said, sure. And can I help you create that vision? And I said, okay. So we worked together. And then the grad students working on this project said, who is going to use this? Is anyone going to use this? They thought they were kind of creating something that no one would use, but you know, people do what they do want to contribute, and if you make it easy. And the other thing you want to do is provide feedback. So our data, similar to eBird, is open, it's transparent. Users can filter by their own data, they can visualize their data, and download their data. And then you can also download an entire data set to be able to analyze. So folks can immediately look for and analyze their data. We also have a top tracker list to motivate folks. So I'm going to go a little bit into a few case studies. So us as the scientists, what can we do with this data? Well, there's folks who will tell you this is opportunistic data. It has a lot of biases associated with it, but I do have a project right now that Noah is supporting with a graduate student who, when we're trying to do sort of a deep dive into the data, what can we say? Can we compare it on a regional level? NOAA Marine Debris Program has different regions, so the characteristics of the data, and we have it split up, I should give this, it's split up into categories. So the material that each item is made out of plus each item individually. So for example, in the plastic category, you would find straws. And so we're going to look at comparing those NOAA regions for data on a scientific level. Sort of more on an outreach and education level, we have a partnership with 11th Hour Racing, and this is to reach out to the sailing community. So we designed the app so it works offline. So you can be in a remote setting, you can be in the middle of the ocean. I was able to use it when we crossed the Atlantic sampling plastic in the middle of the ocean. And once you connect to internet, then you can submit your data. So as long as you have a GPS signal, you can go ahead and log data. And it's been used in the Atlantic Cup race, the Pacific Cup race, and so continues to sort of grow in that sector. Another group that's utilizing the app and another way we make our data available is a group of students in the San Francisco Bay Area called Earth Team. And what they did is they're using the app as a group, but they made their own website. So they built an API to talk to our database and created their own map on their website. So as far as open data, you can even do that. You can access our database and map your data yourself in your own situation. And then another way this data would be used, and I told you I'd connect it back to the front, is to look at what we're finding. So these groups, these 4 groups at the top have compiled data, and this was just for the state of California. And they're trying to look at what are we finding out there, and is there a design flaw with this item? How can we figure out how to change these products so that they don't end up in our environment? And it's called, they're looking for better alternatives now to plastic and looking at product redesign. And so I think you're going to hear from another person collecting litter data here in a minute, Jeff. And I think when you can combine all these data sets, they can be really powerful. And so the message here, what has become evident to me as this data comes in, first of all, I just find it fascinating that data comes in every day from people using the app. And it really has illustrated to me, these are 2 of our top trackers. The picture on the left underneath is Omaha, Nebraska, and this is illustrated to me. One individual over time can have this impact. One person over time has that much impact. The other group, Jekyll Island on your right, is a whole collective community. So one person taken collectively has a huge impact. And so it has re-inspired me myself just to make those changes every day where you think, oh, it doesn't matter if I make this one choice. But either over time those choices matter or taken collectively. And it's just really inspiring and I remain optimistic in that we can address this issue. And here's just a few quotes. The West Coast Marine Debris Alliance did a evaluation of the app, and some of the folks have just really been happy with how it goes. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill McShea, and I'm going to talk to you about eMammal, another app that's developed as part of the Smithsonian. And my partners in this are Roland Kays down North Carolina State University and Robert Costello, who's at the Museum of Natural History here at the Smithsonian. And eMammal is based around these wildlife trip cameras, game cameras. These are a relatively recent thing that has been adopted more by the public than by scientists. It's a great tool for us, but actually, there's more of these being sold every year than binoculars right now. They are a very big tool out there for the hunting, wildlife community. They're in a lot of homes and all across this country. But we can use those things. I'm a member of the Smithsonian. This is the Smithsonian. We have rows and rows and buildings of animals with tags on their feet. And this is the way we know what the biodiversity is out there, and we know how this biodiversity has changed. We have a record of where something was, what it was, when it was there. That is incredibly important information that allows us to track how our natural world is doing. Those specimens are pretty hard to collect nowadays. They're hard to have the expertise that knows how to prepare them. It's hard to actually go to the site and get that stuff, and it's hard to bring it back here to the Smithsonian due to the permitting. These pictures are really the biodiversity specimens of the future as far as mammals go. With this picture, I can get almost all the information I can get from that physical specimen. I know what the species is, I know where I got it, I know when I got it, I know who collected it, so I can go back to the person that collected it. I have everything there except for maybe the actual DNA sample, which has a lot of value. But for the most part, this is the way. I can collect this picture, put it in my pocket, come home, no questions asked, no permitting involved. It has become for scientists a great way to document biodiversity. So we want to use this camera trapping images as our biodiversity data of the future. To do that, though, we have to set up certain parameters in order for this to be useful. We didn't just dream up the name eMammal. I worship at the altar of eBird. The bird community has done exactly what I want to do for mammals. With their citizen science network, we know which species are increasing, which species are decreasing, how their migration routes are changing, how their timing is changing. I cannot tell you that for a single mammal in North America. Not even white-tailed deer. I don't know. Nobody's doing it. And if they're doing it in their own little silo and not collaborating with data sharing. We don't know anything about mammals the way we know about birds. I tried this thing first on the Appalachian Trail. We tried using citizen scientists to collect data from North Carolina up to Pennsylvania. We recruited the Appalachian Trail clubs. They loved it. It was like geocaching in reverse. We gave them coordinates. They put the camera at that part of the trail. After 3 weeks, they collect the camera and they take it to the next coordinate on their list. They loved it. They came back every year to do this project. We published some papers. I would never do that project again if my life depended on it. It was a logistical nightmare. People are loading pictures up the Dropbox and mailing me data sheets that I can't read, and pictures are getting lost, and metadata's over here. If we're going to do that thing again, I figured we need a data pipeline. We need a way to streamline and standardize that data so that the picture and the metadata can stay connected to each other through the whole thing. So we need a data pipeline. A data pipeline is the essential component of any app that's going to be scaled up to some national or international basis. And we built this data pipeline with an NSF grant, Roland Kays and I and Robert got, to try to build something that allows people to contribute to the Smithsonian in a meaningful way. And the way the app way the pipeline works is you have your people and your camera down here. You have a desktop app. Use that desktop app to sort and identify your data. You then push send. It goes up to a cloud site. At the cloud site, an expert looks at it and says, yes, that's a deer. Yes, that's a cheetah. Yes, that's a squirrel. In it goes into the Smithsonian repository. Then it comes out at a website where the people can see their data. One thing we found out right away, if you don't let people see the data they collected, they're going to stop collecting. There has to be a pipeline that goes all the way back to them. I know what I want to do with the data. What we find out is citizen scientists want to do something themselves with the data. They want to be able to work with the data just as much as me. And unless I give them that opportunity, I don't get the involvement that I want to have. So at this point, we have about 500 volunteers, as part of that project, 500 volunteers, 4,000 locations, 6 states, 4 million images. We didn't lose any of them. We didn't disconnect any images from their metadata. We built a pipeline that allows that data to move through and stores it in the Smithsonian so that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, someone can go back to the Appalachian Trail or these national parks and look again for those mammals. So this thing, and that's as nice as any bird picture, if you ask me. We have 4 parts of this: desktop app, cloud site for expert review, Smithsonian repository, and then website for showing people their data and allowing them to get access to their data. The 2 parts that the public see, this is the desktop app. This, you bring in, you put your little SD card in your computer, brings it up, sorts it into what we would call sequences, and then allows you to tag the sequence with the species, the number, the sex. Then you upload that thing, and that metadata travels with it everywhere it goes. I don't need anyone's favorite photo. What I need is all your photos. I need them all tagged with what you saw. And then it comes out at the website where there's a discussion post. People can talk about the photos. People can exchange photos. People can download the data if they want to download the data. So right now, we've got a lot of projects in the system. We've got about 74 projects. Those are all 74 PIs who all are collecting camera trapping data for some reason. 38 of those are US projects. And of those 38 projects, they have about 1,400 citizen scientists involved in those different projects, all using the website, all using the pipeline, and they may use the data for what they want. It gets stored in the Smithsonian for the future, and then it is accessible to the public. And what you end up is something like this. This is just a snapshot of the eastern United States. All those little numbers are different deployments that were done in those areas. And this is from a number of different projects, but now they're seamless. You can just put a box around and download whatever data you want from whatever project it came from. They're no longer in different silos of each researcher having their own data set with their own metadata structure. The great thing going forward is Roland Kays has talked the state of North Carolina into doing a statewide survey. They're putting cameras in the libraries. You go to the library, check out a camera, document your mammals, bring your camera back, check it in for the next person. It becomes the national, this is a statewide survey, but it's the seed towards some national survey that would tell us across an animal's range where it is and where it isn't. Part of this is to try to utilize this data. Some of our citizen scientists are students, and they use it as part of STEM learning, as a way to collect data and use data in a way that they can make their own hypothesis, use the data the way they want, in addition to the way that I want. So we've been doing this in Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, and it's been working. We have curriculum built around the use of the eMammal data. And I have to say, the key to the whole thing are the volunteers. The volunteers enjoy doing the work, and they enjoy seeing the product, and they enjoy contributing to something that is permanent. If you look at a word cloud of these exit interviews for volunteers after the end of the year, this is what we want. We want to connect people with nature. We want to get people outside. We want people to realize the biodiversity is in their own backyard. eMammal, any kind of these apps that we're talking about today do that. They bring people closer to nature. So eMammal is sitting at we're trying to sit in a sweet spot that all the apps should be. We're good for scientists right now. We make their job easier. We save that data for the future, so you can go back and see that data again 10, 20, 30 years from now. We involve citizen scientists. We give them a way to contribute to studying this planet. And lastly, we provide a venue for kids to get involved in science and learn how to do science. I think any of our apps all work along those lines. Try to bring those four things together. So I know we're going to do questions later, but eMammal is a way to do with mammals the way they've been doing a wonderful job with birds. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Box. I'm the Vice President of Global Fisheries Solutions with RARE. And I'm meant to be talking about an app called Our Fish, which is an app to collect up fisheries data and help manage small-scale fisheries around the world. But I'm actually going to talk about something slightly different. I'm going to talk about an app as a tool, about how we can use it not only to collect data, but to connect people together to solve real global challenges that can help lift people out of poverty and really help sustain both people and nature. Especially in communities like this, where the idea that an app could be useful seems incredibly far-fetched. This is a small village in Myanmar. And this story starts with one man, and a man who inspired an idea to build an app that could lead to global change. Meet Noel. He's a 60-year-old fisherman. He lives to fish. He's been fishing since he was 8 years old, and he lives off the coast of Honduras in this small community. This community, fishing isn't just a job. Fishing is the way of life. Everyone here fishes. Everyone here lives on and in and around the sea. Fish for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. This is fishing. And I used to spend time with Noel, sitting on his boat. I was studying fisheries in Honduras, and he would sit there and fish, and I would sit there and measure the fish, and I'd take samples of the fish. But while we were doing that, I was doing my science, and he was doing his job. We would talk, and he would tell me these stories of abundance, of incredible grouper spawning aggregations, of snapper migrations, just an incredible abundance of fish in these waters. And this was in stark contrast to what we were seeing. We were sitting there pulling out small fish in low numbers, and there was this disconnect. And as I started working in other fishing communities around Honduras and eventually around the world, these same stories were being repeated. There was this central narrative that fish were no longer abundant, that fish were smaller, that people had to fish longer, And the people that were there on the water, in the water, under the water, had this narrative. And there were these echoes of Noel coming through over and over again. That abundance in the water, all of these fish, were fading. And with that, the rural economy, the way people were making money, was also under pressure. There was a real struggle here, not just because of livelihoods, but also for food security. And there was a real challenge. How do we solve this? So I set up data collection networks. I was a scientist. I was thinking, right, we can solve this. We can collect data that can really help solve this problem. And I did what a lot of people have done. I sat at docks. I measured fish. I put teams together, put them at different docks, and tried to really scale this up so that we could collect lots of data. And I realized I was on a fool's errand. I could never get enough information from all of these different locations and sustain that through time. And I went to national governments in the countries we were working and said, look, where's your data on small-scale fisheries? I know this is important. You must know it's important. And they were saying, well, we've tried. We don't think it's a priority. And the data we have collected, well, we don't really know what to do with it, so it's in the room over there. And they were like, but don't worry, it's not that important. These are small-scale fisheries. But small-scale fisheries employ 90% of all fishers and fish workers on the planet. So clearly it is important, but people hadn't been able to solve this problem. But I was spending time in these coastal communities, and I was seeing out of the corner of my eye that there was someone else writing things down. There's a data collector in the making in this photo. And he's sitting there and he's writing stuff down in his books. And this is transaction information. When a fisher would come in to sell his fish or her fish, there's a transaction going on. And that gets written down. It gets recorded because they might have borrowed some money to be able to go out fishing. They might have bought some fuel that they'd pay with the fish when they come back in. And there was all of these records all around the world. Data is being collected in these small fishing communities. Here was scale. Here was an opportunity. But how do we actually leverage that? How could we get that information out of those books? So we built an app. There's an app for everything these days. So the real challenge is how do we get that data from the guy on the left collecting it to the man on the right who's just tapping away and he's back to Facebook and WhatsApping. And that was the challenge. Could we solve it? Could we build an app that would do that? And the answer is yes. That's the short part of this story. Yes, there's an app. It's called Our Fish. You can go to communities and see fish buyers using it. They register fishers. It's linked their transactional data to an individual fish data. It's wonderful. It's in Myanmar, it's in Belize, it's in Honduras. Story over, but not quite. What it's doing is it's starting to formalize their economy. It's starting to formalize what's going on. There are now records of that transaction. And that has huge power. And this is where the story, I believe, becomes really interesting. Yes, the app's exciting, it's digitally phenomenal, but the real power is two things. And you need two real enabling conditions to enable this to happen. The first is you can't just put an app in isolation and expect everything to be solved. You can't expect that a piece of technology will solve this problem. You need the community around it. If we're actually going to solve small-scale fisheries problems, we need to empower, motivate, and excite communities that they have the solution in their hands. And that's the Fish Forever project at RARE. That's a global program to motivate and activate people. So being able to combine these two things together to give education and awareness to the communities at the same time as providing a tool to collect up and use information has real power. It generates pride. It generates momentum to solve this global problem. And we empower people to make change. So that was one key part of this. It's not just the technology. It's having the community around that technology, such as citizen science in these cases, or to solve this fundamental global challenge. But there's another piece, and this is a next step. This is how we take this tool combined with the local community empowerment and connect it up with something that's been going on in Kenya for 10 years now. This is M-Pesa. Pesa means money in Swahili. This is a way of transferring money between people without needing a bank account. Really, really important in countries where bank networks are just in cities, they're not in rural communities. Very important where you previously had cash economies. You can now transfer money digitally or through cell phone networks. That's huge. That enables people to access formal credit. So imagine the power that Kenya has been having for 10 years. And a recent study came out in Science. Using M-Pesa had lifted 200,000 households out of extreme poverty. And this is where we're now going with the app. Imagine a not too distant future where you have people using the app, using our fish to record their transaction data, surrounded by a community that is empowered and realized that they can solve their small-scale fishing problems, and linked to technology that already exists to formalize those financial transactions, to enable people to have access to savings, have access to insurance, have access to alternative credit, so they're not just relying on payday lenders, cash lenders. They're no longer vulnerable. That builds financial resilience along with community empowerment. So we go back to Noel and his inspiration. I still am in contact with him whenever I go back to Honduras. He's still there, and he doesn't use a phone. And he's going, no, that's not for me to do. But I really love the power that you're giving to the next generation. I love that there could be a future. As we've talked about decline, you're seeing a shift as communities start to do this. And that's the power of this story. Not just the app itself, which you can look at videos, Google, Vimeo, Our Fish, and you can see them. The real power is what we can do with them. And that's the Fish Forever program and the power of Our Fish embedded in that. Thank you very much.
Looks like that presentation's not there. Here we go. Hi, I'm Jeff. This story starts with these two. These are my kids. And we were hiking through the Oakland woods when my daughter noticed someone had thrown a plastic tub of cat litter into a creek. And she looked at me and she said, "Daddy, that doesn't go there." And when she said that, it reminded me of when I was a kid. I used to go to camp. And on the morning of visiting day, right before they'd let our anxious parents come barreling through the gates, our camp director would say, "Quick, everybody go pick up 5 pieces of litter." So now you get a couple hundred kids, each picking up a few pieces, and within a few minutes, we had a much cleaner camp. And I thought, why not apply that crowdsourced cleanup model to the entire planet? That was the inspiration for Litterati. The vision is to create a litter-free world. Let me show you how it started. I took a photograph of a cigarette butt using Instagram. Then I took another photo, and another photo, and another photo, and I noticed 2 things happening. One, litter became artistic and approachable. And 2, at the end of a few days, I had 50 photos on my phone, and I had picked up and either thrown out or recycled each and every piece. And I realized that I was effectively keeping a record of the positive impact I was having on the planet. That's 50 less things that you might see or you might step on or some animal might eat. And so I started telling people what I was doing. And they started participating, using Instagram, photographing litter, adding this hashtag Litterati, and then throwing out or recycling the item. And one day this photo showed up from China. And that was when I realized that Litterati was more than just a collection of pretty pictures. We were becoming a community, and the community was generating a lot of data. So each photo tells a story. It tells us who picked up what, a geotag indicates where, and a timestamp tells us when. So the next thing we did was put together a Google map and started plotting the individual points where people were picking up individual pieces of litter. And as the community grew, well, the data grew. My 2 kids go to school right in the bullseye. Litter, it blends into the background of our lives, but I started wondering, what would it look like if we brought it to the forefront? How might we use the data to make a difference? Well, let me show you. The first is with cities. The city of San Jose contacted us early on during a whole Valentine's Day campaign. They wanted to spread the love. And the way they did that was use Litterati to get their citizens involved to keep their city clean and show their love for their community in doing so. San Francisco caught wind of that and said, we have a slightly different idea. They wanted to understand what percentage of litter came from cigarettes. So long before Litterati existed, the city of San Francisco put people in the streets with pencils and clipboards, and they walked around and created that collection, that data, and that led to a 20-cent sales tax on all cigarettes. You can imagine that created a massive revenue stream for the city of San Francisco, and then they got sued by Big Tobacco, who claimed that pencils and clipboards were neither precise nor provable. And so I got this phone call from the city who said, hey, we heard about Litterati. Can your technology help us? And I don't think they recognized that our technology at the time was simply my Instagram account. But I said, yes, we can. And so we did. 4 days and 5,000 pieces later, Litterati's data was used in court to not only defend, but double the tax, generating $4 million a year in annual recurring revenue for the city of San Francisco to help clean itself up. Now, during that process, I learned 2 things. One, Instagram was not the right tool, so we built an app. And 2, if you think about it, every city in the world has what we call a unique litter fingerprint. If you could generate an interesting tax revenue just from cigarettes, well, what about soda cans, candy wrappers, potato chip bags, and coffee cups? How might you use that data to just be smarter about where we place trash cans? And if you could do it for San Francisco, well, what about Oakland or Central Park or much closer to home or somewhere not so close to home? The second group is brands. We've started doing quite a bit of work there. I'm going to give you 2 examples. The first was with Whole Foods, who ran an Earth Day campaign. Anybody who brought in 1 Litterati photograph got a free baked good. Whole Foods was excited for 2 reasons. 1, it was good PR. And 2, they knew anybody who came in for that free baked good was going to shop. Let me give you an idea of where we're headed. This is a block in downtown Oakland, and it's covered in blight. The Litterati community got together and picked up 1,500 pieces. And here's what they learned from the data. 1, most of the litter on that block came from a very well-known taco brand. Most of that brand's litter were their own single-use plastic hot sauce packets. And the real kicker is that most of those hot sauce packets haven't even been opened. So now imagine if you work with that brand in a creative and collaborative way. Imagine if that brand can now take this environmental hazard, turn it into an economic engine, and suddenly they become an industry hero. The last group that we've done a ton of work with are schools. And frankly, if you're really going to create long-term transformative change, where better to start than with our kids? Kids have started creating art exhibits, citizen science projects. I'll give you one example of perhaps my favorite school. It's a group of 5th graders in a town called Modesto, California. They picked up 1,247 pieces just on their schoolyard. And they learned that the most common type of litter on their campus were the plastic straw wrappers from their own cafeteria. So these 5th graders went to the principal and said, why are we still buying straws? And they stopped. And they learned that individually they could each make a difference, but together they created an impact. And what we say at Litterati is it doesn't matter if you're a student or a scientist, whether you live in Honolulu or Hanoi, this is a community for everyone. It started with 2 little kids in the Northern California woods. And today, we're in 113 countries. And the way we're doing it is 1 piece at a time. Thank you.
Great. Our team presented 5 and 1 from me. Great case studies of apps that are out there for you to use, whether you're exploring the natural world or exploring the world of trash. We do have some time. Everybody did cut their talks a little bit, so we had some time for, I want a discussion among our panelists, but also some questions from you in the audience. But before we begin those questions, I would like to first ask for some participation from those in the audience. How many of you have an app on your smartphone right now for doing this sort of thing? All right, that's not enough. So everybody's going to download right after this. How many of you have created your own app? 1, 2. How many? 3. How many of you would like to create your own app? Oh, that's a little better. That sounds great. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go down and ask the app creators here that are sitting in front of us. First of all, what was the greatest hurdle you had in making a successful app in terms of what you were trying to achieve? And let's start with Marshall first on that. Just take a couple minutes or a minute to give us an answer and something to think about.
So, I mean, in the context of smartphone apps, there's no question that the challenge for us is funding. It's incredibly expensive to hire programmers that are really expert in developing on multiple platforms. We only support iOS and Android. We'd like to do Windows phones and other things, and it's just prohibitive in terms of what we can do with the market. And just recently we had our primary iOS developer move on to another position, and it's taken us 4 months to refill that position. So apps are not static things. You don't just build them and they work. You have to continually be ready with every upgrade, every iOS change. That app developer has to go in and reissue it. So for us, the ability, especially with lots of other things going on in the project, to fully support that app side, given the costs involved, is a real challenge. It's one we think we've met now, but for me, that's an easy answer.
Yeah, great. And let me remind you that the discussion after this is on philanthropy, so I think you brought up a really good thing.
I'll just really quickly add to that. I would echo that working in the university. And I think because I was so surprised to me that it was time to talk, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jenna Jambeck, an associate professor of environmental engineering at the University of Georgia. So I'm just gonna add that the resources and my collaborator, luckily being a computer systems professor, that is what we've been able to move forward initially. But I've only had, in terms of running sort of the whole program, while I'm also teaching and doing other forms of research, many of you may experience this. You want to have an app, but it's not your full-time job. Okay, so this is something that we dedicate a lot of our time to when we have the time. And my social media is one undergrad student. And we do have a whole virtual community, but keeping them engaged, keeping them excited, and updating the app and updating the website, and it's just you really have to be passionate about this and ready to sort of work beyond the hours, at least in my world. And so that is a really challenge because there's just not enough time. I'd love to dedicate more time to this, but I also have to do all the other things I have to do as an associate professor. So that's my challenge.
Okay.
Ditto. I think it's all ditto. I'm a researcher, and I do projects. And when that project ends, I go on to the next thing. An app needs institutional support. It needs program support. And you need that buy-in from some institution to sustain that thing. And then as a researcher, I can go and ask someone for money to, let's look at mountain lions, let's look at cheetahs.
Oops, your
Say,
mic went
sure.
off.
And then you say, I need 40% to go to the IT structure, and they say, no way. We're not paying for that. So supporting that IT structure is very hard.
Steve, let me ask you a different question.
Well,
or do you have a real? Okay.
I have a different answer.
All right.
But thank you. I'm going to say language and literacy, because the app that we were building was for use in very rural coastal communities where education levels were very low, and we were trying to replace something which is a very common piece of technology called a paper and pen. And trying to make an app that's so user-useful and user-friendly that you can replace a paper and pen is actually very hard. So I think the hardest thing was to make it incredibly simple, but could then be scaled globally without having to translate it every time.
Go ahead, Jeff. No.
You got any questions?
I think it's the problem that you didn't see coming. I don't think building the app is the hard part. Yes, there are plenty of challenges and obstacles, and funding is certainly one of them, and resource. I think it's the stuff that you never in a million years thought would throw you the curveball. And because of that unpredictability, it makes it really hard to prepare sometimes. And so just maintaining a level of flexibility in what you do, I think, is critically important.
Okay, let me ask anybody to answer this one, or all of you again. What was the most important thing that you learned about your end user in creating your app? Maybe in the second year after you created this app, what was the most important thing you learned about the people that were using it?
I'll start just because I have the conch. We're in our first year with the app, and so I think the reality is that we're still learning every day. For us, there have been a lot of surprises, but what's interesting is that the feedback loop is so critically important because it allows you to create an emotional connection with people. And I think for us, one key learning has been that if there is a void of an emotional connection, if that doesn't exist, it makes engagement really challenging.
Definitely the engagement piece is critical, and from where we were trying to put this app, trying to build literacy around the problem at the same time as putting the app in was really important. Why do people need to collect data? Why do you need information to manage fisheries? Why do you need to know how much money you're actually making on a daily basis? Those seem like really obvious fundamental things when we're sitting here in this room. But from the fishers that we've been working with and the fish buyers, they're going, well, no, we're fine, just working day to day, working on cash. And so trying to shift that behavior, change the behavior, is a crucial part of the app adoption.
Just understanding the citizen scientists, I thought I understood their motivation.
For some reason, it doesn't work for you.
For me, right. Oh, there's a little notch here. Now I've lost it again. Oh, there it is. Citizen scientists, I don't know their motivation as well as I thought I did. And I really had to spend a lot of time talking to them. Why are they doing this? What is the feedback that they get? And it made everything go much smoother once I understood them.
I thought everyone was going to be really happy to not have paper and pen, and that's not true. When I first introduced even the PDA in New Hampshire, there was just a surprisingly number of people who were like, I don't want to try that. I know that that it's going to make the data more efficient, and so I think. Again, trying to learn people's motivation on why they would maybe adopt this new method. People had been using paper and pen forever and felt really wedded to that.
So I guess for me, maybe it's a little twist on the question, but we've been doing this thing. We do eBirder of the month, and we've got binocular sponsorship that we can give away binoculars once a month. And all you have to do is tell us your story about how you use eBird, and we select you randomly from kind of challenges that you compete. And I think for me, the really surprising and inspirational thing are the stories that come back from that, which I think gets at that we're not doing a very good job kind of collecting the whole range of stories and ways that the community have kind of taken this app that we put out to just collect bird data and come up with their own ways of using it in communities. So just local monitoring projects or individual aggregations of people they're kind of designing their own projects using our app to develop it. on our side, I'd really like to hear more of those stories. And my sense from this little snippet of it is that we're missing a lot of those. And if we hear more of them, then we can design our apps better to kind of empower those.
Great. Let me just say, from the viewpoint of LeafSnap, developing this app where one takes a photo of a leaf, I was amazed at what people thought a leaf was. We received so many photos of things that didn't even resemble a leaf by any means. So I think there's a big educational curve in terms of just educating people about what leaves are and what biodiversity is. Let me ask, are there any questions from the audience that would like to pose to any of our panel members or to all of our panel members? There's a microphone right up here, so would you like to come up and...
Is it on? Hello? Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Caitlin Kim, UMD freshman undergrad. Could you guys just talk a little bit about your marketing strategies for getting your apps out to the public?
Jeff, do you want... oh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, I'm a bird watcher. All the team I work with of 3 others that are kind of on the interaction with the user side, we're all bird watchers. So we've done a lot of talks around the country and things to try to get some mobilization. We've got email blasts that go out to our entire audience on a regular basis. We've got these challenges that we run, and we've got partnerships all over the world. So there's versions of eBird that run in Turkey, in Turkish, and in Taiwan, and Chinese, and in Australia, and New Zealand, and Portugal. And so really empowering those partners to just take the technical side that we've developed and to kind of market in their own communities for us has been super important. And it takes a lot of extra work to keep up with translations and things, but it's worth it.
Quickly, so I mentioned, I think I have it's mostly for us, social media. I have one undergrad student who does the social media and engages that way. But a lot of our partners, so working with NOAA in the first place, they've been helpful in terms of getting the word out. And I think that also, because we don't have, a big marketing budget, it's just me mentioning it. So when I'm traveling, when I'm talking about research, because I research in this space, I can mention it. We did sort of hit the jackpot. In 2014, Apple made a promotional video for their Worldwide Developer Conference, and they mentioned Marine Debris Tracker. And I found out this was like a tweet from the tech editor from USA Today, and I had a Google alert right on Marine Debris Tracker, and so it said Pinterest, Marine Debris Tracker, something else mentioned at the Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC, and I thought, well, that's a joke. That didn't happen, who's messing with me? And it actually was. So Emily Penn, who is a ocean advocate, said Marine Debris Tracker was an app she couldn't live without. So that right there was an amazing, occurrence. So just, you never know what's going to happen. You just try to do your best to get the word out. But that was some good luck there.
We use a franchise system. A museum or a zoo or a university will set up a project, and they will do their own recruiting within their network, and we don't try to recruit too much directly from eMammal.
I'll keep this short because I believe there's other questions as well. We don't really have a marketing strategy. We're working in partnership with national governments or with civil society organizations, other NGOs, and also our own programs and projects to really help both the government solve this data collection issue and for the communities to really start managing the fisheries. So it's kind of different. It's not really a commercial app.
We've been lucky. We've had a ton of press. I'm a TED resident and did a talk that was just featured by TED, and that certainly gave quite a bit of exposure. I just also learned today that I think Litterati was featured by Apple today in honor of Earth Day. I haven't seen that yet, so I'm hoping I can ride on Jenna's coattails. But besides, and we're doing a lot of things in-app to encourage the community to get closer, which we think are more valuable than anything. Long-winded answer, but you have to have a simple, shareable story. At the end of the day, that's what I really think is most important. And if you, no matter whatever problem you're trying to solve, whether it's climate change, something with waste, something with animal protection, like pinpoint that problem, come up with a really simple solution, and make that story clear, concise, and compelling, and you'll have a really tight marketing strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have one more question, and I think we have to end the session. Over here.
As I heard you talking about all of your development struggles and successes, somehow the idea of the CSAs, Community Sustainable Agriculture, came to mind. In the old days, every farmer would try to show up and have every crop. And at some point, somebody says, you're good at growing tomatoes and you're good at this, and why don't we share and swap and have a slightly different business model? So I was wondering, given that you're in the world of collaboration, you have all these super talented people who are giving their talents. Some of them probably have software development. And then I'm also wondering whether there's collaboration between and amongst institutions where it's like, why do we each have to build the whole thing if we have this collaboration where, oh yeah, we already built that. And, you sign this agreement and you have to share your data with us or something. I know the Smithsonian lawyers might go crazy.
Let's not worry about this.
Yeah, about branding and, and legal monetization, all that. But is there collaboration within your community of collaborators? Just a thought.
Any?
Certainly in my community there is. And we're sort of the new guy. The way that I'm probably different from my fellow panelists is I'm not an environmentalist by trade. I'm a writer. I started my career in advertising. I just happen to have a 4-year-old daughter who got me to see the world in a way that I hadn't before. But what I'm learning is that it's very collaborative. You absolutely run into certain challenges. And one you didn't mention is that when you're sharing data, sometimes that data is in different formats and different storage containers, can't be shared. So there's all sorts of complexities. But when we're all going after the same problem, it certainly makes sense to have a collaborative effort.
The short answer, yes. Yes. Partnerships are crucial to success. You can't achieve it on your own. You've got to work with others in the space. You've got to look for unusual partnerships as well. Look for people who are thinking at the problem from completely different angles. That's where the idea of linking with smart money came from. I'm not a cell phone company. I know nothing about that space. We've been talking with Google about how can we use some of their engineering expertise behind some of this. So yes, talk frequently and often with everyone.
As a scientist, data sharing is a touchy subject, and we've sort of created a community of the willing, and the success stories within that community are convincing more and more people to share their data. But there's definitely a resistance out there to, I collected it, it's mine, go get your own. But I think we're overcoming that.
Yeah, and quickly I showed that table where our data had already been combined with like 3 other data sets, and I'm hopeful that can just continue to grow. And I think I'm just excited that I was here today, and I hadn't met any of these panelists before, and I'm thinking exactly what you were saying, like, well, we should maybe talk about how this all works and how we can do more.
Yeah, super important collaborations. We collaborate a lot on the data analysis side with other universities and other people that may or may not be involved with birds on how to analyze the data. On the, in terms of kind of, technical collaborations, there's a ton of bird watchers in the world. There really are. And our biggest challenge is not really thinking at this point, although we are thinking like, how do we, is the eBird platform good for monitoring other taxa, but other kinds of animals. But there are all these sort of projects similar to eBird in Europe and Asia and Africa that are essentially doing the same thing. They're often doing it in a really border-restricted region, just within a country, just in Denmark, just in Germany. And what we really want to do is help foster collaboration that'll plug all those data sets together and and really make that powerful. There's a lot of, national pride, university and institutional red tape, and challenges to that. But we're making a lot of progress, and the Israeli system is coming into eBird this summer, which will be really, really fun example. And there's many other examples and many others that we're hoping will come to pass in the next few years.
Great. Marshall, Jenna, Bill, Steve, Jeff, thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your apps. Great. Thank you very much.